Welcome to the First Cut Podcast. I'm Rick Gehman, and this is your preview live on CBS Sports Network for this week's Olympics, or should I say this year's Olympics. Greg DuCharme is joining me today. Greg, we do daily recaps. We do weekly recaps. We get Ryder Cup years. Sometimes it's President's Cup years. It is not frequent that we get to say the Olympic Games start tomorrow in the golf world.
It is not a very frequent thing, Rick. You know, obviously the summer games only happen every 4 years. But in the game of golf, it has a very short history. So for a very long time, before 2016, there was no golf in the Olympics. So it's something that's new. It's something that's fun, and also, as you said, very rare.
Kyle Porter rounds out our crew for today. KP, there's I get a little giddy about this. It's tough to qualify for. We've got an interesting little field. We've got a golf course that we have seen before. We're going to dive into all of that, but this is going to be fun. This is going to be different. So when you look at that history, Greg, and it is a short history, right? So the Olympic Games, the modern Olympic Games, go back to 1896, but golf as an Olympic sport only had two editions in 1900, Paris, which we're back at again this time around, and 1904 in St. Louis. Then we had that long break, that 112 years that you were talking about between St. Louis and the Rio Games. So now that we've got two editions under our belt, 2016 and 2020, how do you think that the players have taken on this new kind of feat, this new achievement in the modern game of golf?
Well, I think it's certainly changed, Rick. I mean, if you remember back in 2016 when the games were in Brazil, there was mixed interest. Some people, some of the best players in the world weren't interested. Some were afraid or worried about the Zika virus back at that time, and there have been no precedent set for any of the modern players in the game. So players like Rory McIlroy decided not to go play. And then you think to 2020, and you had the COVID-19 pandemic going on. Everybody's wearing masks. The Olympic Village is not a traditional Olympics, if you will, and it was a very different experience. So this one in Paris really seems like the first time the players who qualified are all vested. They're very interested. It seems like it would mean a lot for them, and I think it's growing in importance every 4 years, which has been pretty cool to see.
Yeah, those 2020 games pushed to 2021 because of the pandemic. And KP, do you feel that as well? Do you feel that these golfers are more invested in this? They take it a little bit more seriously, and the momentum of the Olympic Games for golf as a sport, is that growing right now?
Yeah, I agree with Greg. And I think when you hear guys talk about it, I've listened to and read what a lot of guys have said this week, and it's, to me, the word for what they're getting at is context, like the context of actually being at the games. Because guys back in 2016, whether it was Rory or Jason Day, or I mean, pretty much all the big names were like, whatever, man, and then all of a sudden you get there, and I think it was Matt Fitzpatrick that was like, oh, there's a weightiness to this that I didn't realize. And all of them have said, other than Matthew Pavon, all of them had said, hey, listen, it's not the majors. Matthew Pavon said, I'd actually rather win a gold medal than a major, which, we can talk about that. But the rest, everybody else has said, listen, it's not the majors. It's never going to be the majors. But there's a weightiness when you're there with the Swedish handball team and the French gymnastics team and the Japanese swimming team. Like there's a context there that you can't get unless you've actually been there. And I think for maybe the first time for a lot of these guys, they're feeling the weight of that. And I think that it's certainly become more meaningful over the last 8 years, I think.
Yeah, I think that there is a mutual respect on site being around the best at X, right? The best in the world at whatever your event is, over how many dozens of different events there are. These are the best in the world, and the guys are starting to feel that. And from a golf course perspective, Greg, this is a little bit interesting because 2016, that golf course in Rio was constructed for the Olympics. It had never been played before anywhere else. In 2020/2021, we went to Kasumi Gaseki. That was outside of Tokyo. And then this year, Le Golf National is a golf course that we see yearly on the DP World Tour. It plays host to the French Open, and also, maybe more notably for the American viewership, this is where the 2018 Ryder Cup was held.
Yeah, Kyle and I were talking about this last night on the First Cup podcast. That 2018 Ryder Cup, in some ways, it seems so long ago, but it still stings for us American fans because the Europeans really took us apart. And that one may hurt even more than Rome at this point. But the golf course was the feature during that tournament, during the Ryder Cup. It really took us away. It really took us out of the competition because we weren't able to get the ball in the fairway. Now, this week, it does seem like that's going to be a little bit different. It seems like the rough is a little lower. The course should play a little bit wider. And of course, we have some soft conditions as well, which will widen the fairways and also make the greens play a lot bigger.
The good news this week for the Americans, KP, is that the Europeans don't get to set up the golf course the way that they would like. And you see water lurking on 10 different holes. This could be described as a major championship caliber golf course, even if not every player in the field thinks that this is a major championship caliber feat if they're able to come home with a medal. But this golf course has a lot of teeth to it.
Yeah, it does. By the way, I love that Greg was saying we like he played alternate shot with like Webb Simpson or something in Paris back in 2018. I'm glad you brought up the water because it's something that Greg and I talked about extensively on Tuesday on the First Cut podcast, and it's a course that a lot of guys this week have described as almost playing like an American major, like almost like a PGA championship type course, but I think with a lot more water. So it reminds me a little bit of the Florida swing, right? Bay Hill or TPC Sawgrass or somewhere like that, where you got to be pretty I don't know if strategic is the right word, but you have to manage your misses and you have to have really disciplined course management, and that just screams some names at the top of this of this field, right? Like guys like Scotty Scheffler, who I think is the best course manager in the world, guys like Colin Morikawa, like Xander Schauffele. So I think it's going to be really interesting to see, even though it's set up differently, how guys manage their way around those 10 water holes, because that's I mean, as us terrible amateurs know, that's a way to really take yourself out of a round or a tournament very quickly. And I think it's going to probably come into play somewhat often throughout the week at Le Golf National.
Yeah, the notables in the field for this week who are also in that 2018 Ryder Cup. Remember, that was the year that Tommy Fleetwood and Francesco Molinari went nuts, 4-1. Rory McIlroy was 2-3. Alex Noren was on that winning European Ryder Cup team. He was 2-1. John Rahm 1-2, and Thorbjorn Olesen 1-1. Greg, quickly here, because I like the point that KP made. You mentioned this on Monday as well. There are a lot of aspects of kind of that Florida water bulkhead style of golf that we see in the Florida swing on the PGA Tour. This is kind of a manufactured historical golf course. It's weird that the way they built this, but I thought that you made some good comps to that on Monday as well.
Yes, and one more that I've heard from the manufactured aspect, Rick, Liberty National, another one that comes to mind where they used to play the first, with the Northern Trust. They played events like that on the PGA Tour at Liberty National. They designed this golf course for events like this, for the French Open, for an event like the Ryder Cup, where they moved a lot of soil around to create some big mounds for spectators. And that does a couple of things. One, it puts water in play on 10 holes, like Kyle mentioned, but it also makes, when you miss a fairway, it makes it a little more penal. Because not only are you in really thick rough, but you also have an uneven lie. And this week, the rough will be graduated. So if you just miss the fairway, It won't be nearly as penal as it was in 2018. But as you start to get a little farther up those mounds that they have on either side of the fairway, well, all of a sudden that rough does get pretty long. And that's when guys can really find themselves in some tricky situations.
Yeah, and we are going to start naming some names. We're going to dive into the field. It's an incredibly unique field. We do not get fields like this in the world of golf. We are going to discuss that and much more. But first, we're going to take a quick break. Welcome back to the First Cut Podcast live on CBS Sports Network. We're talking Olympic Games. The men starting their quest for medals this week. The women will go next week at Le Golf National. And KP, I want to start talking about the players in this field. And let's just start with the way this field is constructed. Very unique in terms of our game. Usually, well, firstly, you have to be a part of a membership of some tour, whether that's the PGA Tour, Live Golf, the Korn Ferry Tour, and then based on a variety of different criteria, past championships, your in-circuit ranks, that gets you into tournaments. Throw all that out the window. The qualification for the Olympics is much different, and it creates a situation where we have golfers who are ranked first in the world all the way down to Tapio Polkinen, the Finnish pro who is ranked 427th in the world. KP, he primarily resides on the Challenge Tour in Europe.
Yeah, cowardly Greg refused to pronounce any of the names at the bottom of this field on Tuesday on the First Cut podcast. So I'm proud of you, Rick, for diving in there on some of these names. It's it's interesting, and I think one of the interesting parts of it is just that it's 60 players. It's such a limited field. I think the thing that stands out to me the most about this field is it's weird that we call them teams because they're not teams at all, right? They're all like the American players are all from the same country, but they have no affiliation with one another once balls are in the air on Thursday. They're all just trying to individually win a gold medal. And that's kind of an odd thing, even in the Olympics, where you see a lot of individual sports, but normally there's a team component at least to it, right? You look at swimming or even something like tennis that doesn't have a lot of team formats, they still manage to do doubles. So you get Nadal and Alcaraz playing together and different things like that. I wish golf would go to that. John Rahm spoke about this on, I think it was Monday when he talked, and he just said, I wish there was more, it'd be fun to play with David Puig, who's the other Spanish player in this field, fellow live golfer. And he said it would be cool to do kind of a team component of it with him. Xander Schauffele said, well, if you do any kind of team stuff, it might stretch it out too long. Shocker that Xander doesn't want to play more golf throughout the couple weeks of the Olympics. But it's a fascinating field. I wish we got more of what I think the Olympics is all about, which is representing your country as a team together. The most fascinating stuff so far in the Olympics has been the gymnastics, right? And not the individual side, but the team side, whether it's the women or the men. I think that aspect of it makes it enthralling, and you get built-in context. We'll root. Greg and I were talking about this. We'll root for anything. Judo, handball. I mean, sports that I don't even know what's going on, I'm in, and so I wish we got a little bit more of that with golf.
I've been locked into the archery so far, which is
Sick.
a lot farther than you think that they do, but it's very, very stuff. Greg, this is interesting. There are a couple of proposals for 2028. Nothing set in stone as of yet. There are proposals for potentially a team aspect where maybe there is, they play individually, but hey, add the scores together. It's not like there is a cut here, and then the two best scores are your team. I don't know how you would deal with that with the Americans having 4 athletes and everybody else having 1 or 2. But that's a proposal. There's also a co-ed proposal for 2028, which will be held in LA at Riviera. So there are some ideas floating around. We talked about this earlier. We're still kind of in the infancy of modern Olympic golf, and I think there are ways to kind of trend this in the right direction.
Yeah, there are definitely ways where you could make it different. There are ways you could make it more nationalistic, right? Because ultimately, the biggest story that we're looking at in this tournament so far is what effect is this tournament going to have on the Player of the Year race for Xander Schauffele and Scotty Scheffler? That's like the big overreaching significance of the Olympics, because you have world number one and world number two competing together. If one of them wins, will it affect their ability to win Player of the Year? But it shouldn't be that way. We would like it to be about, well, can the Americans win a gold? And quite frankly, it's not right now. I don't necessarily have a complaint about that, because we do play individual golf's an individual game. So I don't mind it being an individual game in the Olympics, but I would certainly be open to some fun ideas. And I think if you are going to go to a team component, I would love to see just a 72 hole stroke play alternate shot team
Oh,
competition.
it would be
Right?
awesome.
If you have that, because that to me is the only true team golf you can have is alternate shot. And if on the American side you just had two teams competing against one another, and also, competing for a medal, any other team would have to have at least two players. And if you have more than two players qualify, you got to have a fourth. I think that could be a really fun way to change up what we do on the golf schedule, and enhance the Olympics and make it a little bit different.
That would be sick. And KP, I think there is at least a little bit of a precedent for that. Correct me if I'm wrong, or I'm sure someone watching will send me an email about it. I believe in beach volleyball, you can have multiple teams from the same country. I think you can see a Brazil team one, a Brazil team two, a U.S. team one, a U.S. team two. So there is a little bit of precedent for what Greg's going after. I'm digging it.
Yeah, for sure. And I think we probably talked too much about different formats you could do on Tuesday on the First Cut podcast. But I agree with Greg. I think because alternate shot brings in to play all sorts of um, variables and chaos, and you get a lot. I mean, you guys have played alternate shot with buddies. It's just such it your teammates, you're accountable to your teammate, not just your team, but your teammate and your country. And there's a lot going on there that brings about variable. Like, the thing that makes golf exciting that we see at President's Cups and Ryder Cups is different variables that you don't get at other events. And alt shot is one of the biggest that you can bring into play in something like this. And it would just be, and I think it would provide countries that are maybe not as good as Australia or the Ireland or the United States an opportunity. Like, if you have a really good week, with best ball, normally your best players are going to make enough birdies to just destroy everybody else, right? But with alt shot, man, you can get in some real trouble very quickly, even if you're a good team. And then on the flip side, you can play it safe and have a real run at things if you're a bad team. So I think that would be I would be 10x more excited about this event if that's what it was.
Yeah, so to zoom out on those qualifying criteria that we're going to go with this year, they are the top 15 players in the world all being eligible, but you could only have a maximum of 4 from each country. So the only country that had 4 players inside the top 15 were the Americans. So they have 4 golfers represented. Then the rest of the field comes straight from the OWGR rankings. It's a maximum of 2 eligible players from each country that do not already have 2. And then, of course, the host country, France, is insured at least 1 spot, but they do have 2 players in for this week. The way that shakes out, Greg, 17 of the top 32 players in the OWGR rankings, 21 of the top 50 in the 2024 FedEx Cup standings currently in, creates a very top-heavy situation even before we get into the wrinkles that are the OWGR.
Yeah, you're going to end up with a top-heavy field in a format like this, where you're trying to get representation from a number of different countries, which is kind of the point of the Olympics. If you're trying to build the strongest field, it's going to be heavily biased to the Americans. I mean, just in the top 15 alone, you have 9 Americans in the official world golf rankings right now. So it's certainly understandable that only 17 of the top 32 are in this event. Well, that's simply a factor of, I mean, they're probably mostly Americans that are in the top 32 that aren't in the Olympics. And that's because they have 4 of the top 6 in the world. So it's very understandable. And I don't really think there's a solution, because you need to have a many countries represented, because it's the Olympics.
And there are 30 of those countries, KP, represented across 60 golfers, which feels like a pretty job well done. 31 countries, 60 golfers. Golf is a very global game. You could go deeper if you wanted to. You could probably get 50, who knows, 60 different countries represented. But the way that it shakes out for 2024, it does feel like we're going to see a bunch of different flags in the mix.
Yeah, totally. And think about even 2021 in Japan, right? We got CT Pan finished third, and there was what, 6 countries represented in that insane, maybe 5 countries represented in that insane bronze medal playoff. You had the other Rory Sabatini finishing, I think he shot 61 to finish in second to win the silver. So I think there's, if Greg and I talked about this, if you're a lesser player, like if you're ranked 250th in the world, you love having this small field because all of a sudden you don't have to beat the top 50 in the world. You just have to beat the top 10. Now, you could argue maybe beating the top 10 is harder than beating the top 50, but or just as hard as beating the top 50. But to me, if you're a player in the field and you're, like, not very good, this is a really good opportunity to kind of sneak up there and maybe win a silver or bronze or even a gold.
Yeah, I don't think that the podium in 2021 was the podium that most people predicted. We are going to try just that. We're going to give you some predictions, and we're going to look ahead to who could win that gold medal and who might be a surprise on the podium. But first, we're going to take a quick break. Welcome back to the First Cut Podcast live on CBS Sports Network. It's time for some fun, some games, and some picks. We've got predictions for who's going to don that gold medal, who is going to be a surprise to step on the podium. But gentlemen, it would not be a First Cut Podcast if I didn't surprise you with a little bit of trivia on the spot. Yeah, let's do it. So I am looking for the year of the first Olympic Games. Now, I've already spoiled the modern Olympic Games. That was 1896. That is not what I'm looking for. That would be much too simple. I am looking for the first ancient Olympic Games, and I am going with the date, the year that Aristotle suggests, because there is, back then there's a little bit of controversy about what year that might have been, but I'm going with Aristotle's year. Greg, as our reigning trivia champion, would you like to go first?
Well, I will go first. What I'd like to know, we're going so far back. Has serious potential for embarrassment. So I'm gonna just throw a year out there. I could be way off. I'm gonna guess 91 BC.
91 BC is Greg's guess. Kyle, would you take a guess?
Well, I have a conflict right now because I know the answer. I was against my will. I was just given the answer. I'm not going to use that answer. I'm gonna say what I was going to say before I was fed the answer, and I was going to say 80 AD or AD 80. I don't know how you say
okay.
that.
It was 91 BC. Okay, believe it or not, Greg is closer. That is correct, Greg. Answer is 776 BC. So Greg is on BC side of things.
At least you got the calendar right.
He is still 700 years off, but that's okay.
He wasn't 800 years off.
So yeah, just a little bit of time since the Olympics has been around. The modern games, 1896. There was one edition of the Olympics before golf first got in. We talked about that already. So, gentlemen, it is time.
Hold on, 776? Were they doing like crop raising was a sport? Like what? That's so long ago.
The most popular sport was boxing, which adds up. You don't need any equipment.
776.
Oh yeah. Boxing goes back to, I mean, I don't think it's like the boxing we're thinking of right now. I think it's just two guys standing in front of each other wailing away.
I mean, it probably goes back to the cavemen.
Yeah, I mean, I assume
building
wrestling and boxing, I assume, are like
wrestling. Yeah. Okay.
have Olympics forever.
Barefoot running.
Yeah, exactly. The marathon. I don't know.
Which then was just known as running.
Yeah. True.
Good job,
They
Greg.
didn't have Hokas.
Not yet. The 2024 Olympic Games are the ones that I want to turn our attention to right now. And we have each submitted a pick to win the gold medal and also a pick to be a surprise podium finisher. Obviously, if you're just tuning in, that's first, second, or third. And they do break these ties. So we got a massive playoff for the bronze medal in 2021. There will not be splits of these medals. It'll just be 3 golfers. And I want to start there, guys. I want to start with the surprise finishes, and then we'll work our way up the podium. And Greg, you have gone with a golfer who has gotten a little bit hot lately. Who is your surprise to finish on the podium?
It is Shubhankar Sharma. You could call me Greg DuCharme for the rest of the day. I think
Wow.
Shubhankar Sharma's at
I
a
won't.
really good place. Please don't.
I will.
He's playing some really good golf. He plays on the DP World Tour. He hasn't missed a cut on that tour in his last 8 events, which goes all the way back to April. He has done a lot of his damage with his iron play, which I think is a really strong attribute. Also, in his last 5 events, he's gained strokes putting. I look at the approach play performance that he's had and the putting performance that he's had, and that is a great combination for really soft conditions. He also finished T19 at the Open Championship. So I love Shubhankar Sharma to sneak his way onto the podium.
From India, trying to get himself a medal. I went with a Norwegian who went to Oklahoma State. Maybe not the one that you're thinking of. I went with Chris Ventura, that's right, who has been playing very well on the Korn Ferry Tour. He's got a bunch of top 25 finishes. In fact, him playing the Olympics this week might actually impact his status of trying to get a PGA Tour card, but he's going for it. So he's going to make it worth it. This is plenty of good vibes. He's going to be alongside roommate and friend and college teammate Victor Hovland. I think there's going to be a lot of good presence coming from this Norwegian team, but it's Chris Ventura who I think makes a run towards that podium. KP, give us somebody else who might be a surprise name to go home with some hardware.
Yeah, Chris Ventura, neither the most famous Norwegian from Oklahoma State nor the most famous Ventura from Oklahoma State. So he's got that going. It's absurd that going to the Olympics would affect his PGA Tour card. We don't have time for that though. I'm gonna go with Matteo Manassero, the Italian, coming off his best finish at a major championship since 2016. Finished T31 at the Open at Troon. It's actually only his second major he's played since 2016. And he's been playing, I don't know if it's the best golf of his career, but it's the best golf of his career over the last 7 years, probably. He's been kind of bouncing around, Challenge Tour, back on the European Tour. But he's been playing excellent of late. He, like all great ball strikers, struggles with his putting sometimes. I'm just kind of betting on maybe that gets hot for a week and he makes a run at finishing on the podium.
Shubhankar Sharma, Matteo Manassero, Chris Ventura are our surprises to get themselves onto the podium, but I want gold medalists and gold medalists only. KP, I'm going to bounce this right back to you. Who is going home with that gold?
Well, I'm glad you're going to me first because I think Greg and I might have the same person unless he changed his up. But I'm going with Colin Morikawa. We've talked about this a bunch this year, guys. He's the best player in the world that hasn't won so far this year. I think it's not even that close. Ludwig is up there, maybe. But Morikawa has been just lights out. I think he's got 9 consecutive top 16s in stroke play events. He finished outside the top 16 at the Zurich. That was a team event. But other than that, it's been just such consistency from the 2-time major winner. This is a course that if it's a little bit soft, he's gonna be firing darts all over the place. I trust his dispersion pattern. We talked about this with Scheffler, moving the ball around, course management. I don't think he's going to find a ton of water. He's just been playing such great golf, and I think he gets it done for the gold medal.
Collin Morikawa 9-1 to win gold. And Greg, that is also your selection. You have also endorsed Collin here.
I have endorsed Collin. Rick, I think after hearing your pick, it's going to feel a little bit like a mistake, but I really do love what Collin Morikawa has been doing. Kyle mentioned a lot of it, but the putting has also been a really strong attribute. You're talking about him gaining strokes putting in 6 out of his last 8 events, but that goes all the way back to the Masters. His short game has been really in great form as well. That has been a weakness of his in the past. He is one of the most accurate players off the tee in this field, and he's gained strokes in 5 straight approaching the green. This reminds me of Xander Schauffele back in 2021. He was playing great golf, consistently great golf, but just hadn't won. Collin Morikawa seems to be in the same position that Xander was this time around, and I think Collin Morikawa gets the gold.
Yeah, Collin Morikawa is the selection for both Kyle and Greg. I went with the best player in the world, Scotty Scheffler, and the one who is going to have the most fun, gentlemen. I don't know if
I saw this.
Players were asked, hey, what's your nickname? What's your favorite Olympic sport? And what your goal in Paris is. And to a man, every other golfer, Rory, Shane Lowry, Matt Fitzpatrick, all said, get a gold medal. Even Ludwig lowered his standards a little bit and just said, a medal. Scotty Scheffler, KP, said, have fun. And maybe winning a gold medal is fun, but this is the most Scotty Scheffler on-brand thing I've seen in a long time.
Well, maybe it's working too, because you know how many wins those other 3 guys have compared to Scotty this year? Not as many combined. So something's working for world number 1. How about that stamp on his wedge, by the way? How sick is that?
So good.
The ring, the Olympic ring stamped on your wedge. That's big time stuff. It would be, I guess, sicker if it was a gold medal stamped on his wedge. But yeah, have fun. It's a very very Scotty answer going into these games.
Well, we've got much more to talk about. There are implications. We're coming down the home stretch of the PGA Tour season. We talked a little bit about Chris Ventura's implications for being at the Olympics this week, but we're going to dive more into all of that after a quick break. We are back on the First Cut Podcast live on CBS Sports Network. And gentlemen, this week is the Olympics, but next week is the final stop of the PGA Tour's regular season, the Wyndham Championship. My goodness, we are at the end of another regular season here, and let's get everybody updated on the current situation. 70th, that's the magic number that gets you into the playoffs. The top 70 will get you in. And Greg, there are some names on the outside looking in. There are some names kind of just inside that top 70 that should probably be much deeper into those FedEx Cup standings at this point. So the new top 70, which is a couple years old now, definitely has made some obviously a smaller group of guys getting into the playoffs, but has also left some of the better players in the world on the outside looking in.
Yeah, it has definitely made the playoffs and making the playoffs much more competitive. I mean, it used to be when it was 125, which was every year of the FedEx Cup playoffs up until last season. You basically, to get into the top 125, you had to have a couple of top 10s. If you won a tournament, you were definitely going to get inside that top 125, and you also had more events to do it. So it really didn't take much. It took a couple of really good weeks, and you could earn your way into the playoffs. Now, being top 70, all of a sudden you start seeing really good players who have had some pretty good years fighting to get into the playoffs. And there's just not a whole lot of room to move up. Not only, I'm thinking of Andrew Novak specifically. He had 3 consecutive top 10s early on in the season. That would typically be enough. He's played some really good golf in his last 4 events as well. Again, would typically be enough. But all of a sudden, he's outside of the 80th position and has to make up a lot of ground just to get in that top 70. So not only have we seen it get more competitive, we've also seen the points start to spread. So I expect to see at the Wyndham Championship, a pretty small number of guys go from outside to inside that top 70 mark.
Andrew Novak currently 83rd. Winner this year, Harry Hall, 82nd. If you look closer to that number, KP, Davis Riley is 71st. Andrew Putnam, Kurt Kitayama, Luke List, and Lucas Glover are your 71, 72 through 75. And then we could talk about the guys just on the inside, but Greg is right. Historically, we're not going to see a ton of movement, maybe a handful of spots dropping out of 66th to 70th and them getting bumped out for somebody who has a good week at the Wyndham.
Yeah, I think two guys that stand out to me are Nikolai Højgaard, who is, I believe, 76th, 77th? No, 79th. And then you go all the way down to Ricky Fowler at 102nd. That's not something I saw coming at the beginning of this year. And then, look, like I think the names just outside the top 50 are really interesting too, because now the top 50 is your guaranteed signature event guys going into 2025. It's Minwoo, it's Jordan Spieth, it's Nick Dunlap that are just outside that top 50. Obviously, Dunlap is a little bit of a unique case because he's won twice. But one of those didn't count for FedEx Cup points. Victor Hovland's outside the top 50. Justin Rose. I mean, these are not they're not role players. They're big boys, big names. And for them to be outside that top 50 now, the PGA Tour has given itself a little bit of an out in that their sponsor exemptions into or did that go away for next year? Did they get rid of that for next year? I can't keep up.
No, they haven't.
They just gave Tiger the special exemption for whenever he wants it.
Yes.
That's what I was thinking.
So if that field was going to be 70 players, Tiger could make it 71 or from 82 to 83.
Yeah. So I think both of those, both the top 70 and the top 50 are really interesting to watch because of their implications, not just for the rest of 2024 or for the FedEx Cup playoffs in 2024, but also for what it means for guys like Hovland, Minwoo, Spieth, Justin Rose in 2025.
Yeah, that top 51 to 70, Greg, is very packed with stars, and now that's essentially a 2-week run. You assume all those guys are going to be in the top 70. They'll play the first leg of the FedEx Cup playoffs, but they're going to have to play well at some point. The idea of having Justin Rose, Aaron Rai, who's had a great year, Victor Hovland, who is the FedEx Cup champion, might not make it back to Eastlake. Then you throw in Minwoo and Jordan Spieth. I mean, I don't think all these guys are going to make it, and it's going to be shocking when 1 or 2 or 3 of them do not.
All of them certainly will not make it. The one thing that does change from the Wyndham into the first leg of the FedEx Cup playoffs is points are quadrupled. So all of a sudden you have an opportunity to make up a little bit more ground, because not only is first place from 5,000 points to 500 points to 2,000 points, but every place that you finish lower on the board, the point differential is quadrupled as well. So it does give you an opportunity to create a little bit of separation and get in. So while it is a 2-week race, these players are focused on getting themselves ready in whatever they feel is the best way possible to perform well in Memphis. And if you perform well in Memphis, whether you're 70th, 51st, or 29th, you're going to have an opportunity to move way up the board.
I want to dive into a couple of these guys here. And KP, we'll start with Victor Hovland. If he does not get back to Eastlake, that would be a massive disappointment, would it not? I mean, he's our reigning FedEx Cup champion. I think the expectations for what we thought was going to happen for him in 2024, people had him penciled in for a major championship and becoming the #1 player in the world. None of that has panned out. We got a glimpse of greatness at the PGA Championship or at the U.S. Open? I can't even remember. And I guess it was the PGA Championship. And now just potentially not even getting back to Eastlake.
Yeah, it's been 1 step forward, 2 steps back for Hovland this year. He kind of I don't know if he declared himself back. His coach, Joe Mayo, definitely declared him back at the PGA Championship. And it hasn't been, as golf has proven over and over again, it hasn't been as smooth as maybe he thought since then. Look, like, I think we thought of the floor for Victor as getting back to Eastlake, right? Like, I don't think, I mean, it's shocking, frankly. Like, if you would have said on January 1, what's more likely, Victor winning 2 majors or not getting back to Eastlake, I would have said winning 2 majors. And now he's kind of on the outside looking in, unless he has a really great run over the first 2 playoff events. And that's the stretch where he got hot. He caught fire last year, was amazing at the BMW Championship going into Eastlake. But he's in a weird spot. And he can still get into the signature events because top 30 in the world get in, and he's still, I want to say, 11th or 12th in the world right now, or maybe even higher, maybe 7th or 8th. It's not like a disaster, but it's certainly not what we thought coming into the year.
Yeah, certainly not. Well, we've got the Olympics for this week. We've got a lot of hot and meaningful action on the PGA Tour the next few weeks, and we're going to continue this conversation. But first, we're going to take a quick break. Welcome back to the First Cut Podcast live on CBS Sports Network. And gentlemen, the IOC is nowhere near the level of the USGA because we only know future Olympic sites till 2034. Not sure what's going on there, but we've got LA Riviera in 2028 for Olympic golf. And then we're going to Brisbane, down under, to Australia in 2032. So I open this up to you guys. You now are Olympic czars. Where are we going, Greg, in 2036?
In 2036, well, I think we got to definitely come back to this hemisphere because I just simply prefer this time zone. I think it's much easier for me to watch golf. So let's say we go to Nova Scotia, Canada, and we'll play at Cabot Cliffs or Cabot Links for the next games. I think that would probably not the best viewer experience, but I think it'd be awesome to see the best players in the world compete there.
Do we have enough daylight, or do we have too much daylight there this time of year?
Yeah, we're good on daylight.
Plenty. I think there's plenty. KP, you're in charge now. We've got Nova Scotia as our first bid for 2036. Where are we headed? It's up to you.
Well, the cowards at the IOC will never do this, but I think they should go to St. Andrews for the Olympics. The golf will be taken care of, obviously. You could swim in the North Sea. I don't know what you're going to do about gymnastics and track, but they can figure that out later on.
The number of stadiums that would need to be I don't have to build
islands.
I don't know if we could handle it. Maybe if you're interested in the Olympics to a winter sport, that could go to Italy in 2026 or back to France in 2032 or the U.S. in 2034 in Salt Lake City. So we have a lot of options, gentlemen, but I'm glad that bids in for both Nova Scotia and for St. Andrews. Kyle Porter, Greg Sharma, as he is being known for this week, thank you very much. As always, this has been an episode of the First Cut Podcast. And if you like what you've heard, there are a lot of different ways to consume this podcast. First and foremost, you can get us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Watch us on YouTube. That is the Golf on CBS YouTube channel where we do near daily podcasts for all your golf needs. Check us out. We'll see you soon.